We are convinced that it followed us from the national park. We felt that evil force. I don't know if it could sense fear or not. For what reason, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe because I was kind of interested. Whenever I read something interesting like, the witch hunts in Iceland, my curiosity goes off, and maybe it could sense like, oh, maybe this person, I could get to or something. I don't know what their mission would be, but we definitely think it followed us.
Hello and welcome to Your Ghost Stories. Today I'm joined by Cam from North Carolina, and we're going to be talking about an encounter he had recently whilst on a trip to Iceland with his wife. So a big warm welcome to you, Cam, and thanks for joining me today. To give everyone a better understanding of your background, can you tell us a little bit about you, what it was like growing up, and what keeps you busy?
Yeah, well, thanks, Jamie, for having me on. Like you said, I grew up in North Carolina. I moved there when I was 8. I was originally from Texas. My father was in the Air Force, but he got a better job, and we landed in Raleigh, North Carolina. In Raleigh, it's not the typical Southern people that you probably think of. I don't know how, people in the UK view it. Do you guys think, we all have Southern accents?
My probably very ignorant perception of North Carolina, so in my head, I'm thinking kind of mountains, very Southern American, but still civilized.
Yeah, it's definitely civilized. In the cities, I feel like in America at least, in the cities, everyone is kind of the same, but as you go outside the cities, you'll start to see people who are more native to that area, historically speaking. So, I went to a school in Charlotte for my computer science degree, and so now I'm an embedded software engineer for a semiconductor company. They mainly make semiconductor chips, but we're trying to build up systems to show to our customers. Specifically in my group, we're doing automotive stuff. So for the whole electric vehicle craze, we're building power systems and just trying to show our components to car manufacturers.
Nice, man. Sounds like you're up to some exciting and innovative stuff. So, what was your earliest memory or experience that led you to believe in the existence of spirits or ghosts, whatever you may call them?
Well, I can't say that I always did believe in spirits. I still am not completely sure. I'm a very open-minded person, so I'm not very definitive on anything. But I do remember watching Ghost Hunters on TV as a kid, and I was pretty intrigued by that. Just thinking about the possibility of hearing or seeing things that don't really make sense, and just watching TV shows and movies. It always got you thinking as a kid, for sure. But yeah, and I would say in the South, it's not as prevalent. I had an internship up in Boston, and I saw a lot more things relating to ghosts in the New England area, just because it was a little older, and there's some stories and myths, legends, maybe things that are true. But yeah, there's also a town in Georgia. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's called Savannah.
No, I'm not familiar.
Yeah. It's a big ghost town there. So I guess that's an exception for the South. And there's a lot of Civil War sites that people claim are haunted as well. But yeah, I would check out Savannah. There's a lot of ghost things there.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I'll have to take a look. What was your upbringing like in terms of religion or spirituality? Did your family have strong beliefs that potentially influenced you?
So my parents converted to evangelism, I would call it, where the best way I could describe evangelism is it's a Christian faith, but it's strictly from the Bible. There's not really a middle layer. There's not really a big institution that's adding things on or interpreting it for you. Think like the Catholic Church or some pretty big name Protestant churches. But my parents kind of converted. They had some rough childhood experiences, and they found hope and peace in Christianity. But just reading the Bible for themselves, essentially, you still are a free thinker, I would say. But as far as their influence on me, I did grow up in the church with them. But of course, you have to decide for yourself. And my parents, thankfully, they didn't put any taint on the religious views. They never pushed anything on me, but I still went to church with them. And I just found out for myself and looked in as a skeptic, and found it convincing, and this peace and something really to believe in. I feel like everyone, even if you're secular, you have to have something. Like, you have to have some religion, whether it be like, I guess the common trend now is climate change, right? Like, we can all believe that's true, but some people, I feel, take it so strongly that it could be seen as a religion.
Yeah. Have you seen the stuff that's going on in the UK right now with, I think they're called Just Oil, the protesters? It's been going on for a few years.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you say, their crazy cult-like mentality, it is like a religion, right? Sitting in the middle of the road trying to stop ambulances go by. Like, yeah, it's crazy, man.
It is crazy. They're not thinking right, and you could say the same for for some Christian faith and any other religion. There's always some dark periods in any faith, but I think it comes down to self-righteousness. I think everyone wants to feel righteous, and in whatever way makes sense for them, they're going to do something where they feel good about it. And I think you could say that for any belief system.
So as an open-minded person, do you believe in an afterlife? And if so, what do you think it looks like or perhaps involves?
Well, that's a great question. I've been looking at it for years now, and still it's kind of open-ended, at least looking through it in a biblical scope. So when you look at the Bible, you'll see that in the Old Testament, when you die, you die. Like that's what they said, and that's they would say Sheol in the Old Testament, and that would mean the grave. So when you die, you're dead, and therefore that's why most people think the Bible doesn't really support ghosts in the way that we think of them. I would say there's demons, and that's the closest thing Christians would believe to be a ghost, where they can roam and disguise themselves potentially as a ghost. But the Bible never really talks about people maybe being trapped or having revenge on someone, and therefore their spirit is still on the earth. I'm still open to that because the Bible doesn't say anything directly against that theory, but it also doesn't support it. But when you get into the New Testament, there's more revelation on what happens in the afterlife, and it's still kind of murky there. But the best way I see it, and by looking through the Bible and just interpreting it as honestly as I can, is when people die, you're dead. You go to heaven temporarily. And that's something that throws people off. They think heaven's eternal. But actually the Bible doesn't support that theory, because when Judgment Day comes, when Jesus comes back, the theory or what the Bible says is that everyone will be resurrected. Saved or not, everyone's going to be resurrected again. And then Jesus is going to judge everyone. And then he's going to make a new earth or a new creation, which is an entire loop back to the Garden of Eden in like the first, I think it's the 3rd chapter in the Bible, where he's restoring man walking with God. But anyone who did not accept Jesus as his Savior, would go to hell. And hell is also another very interesting thing that I've been looking into. There's a new movement in the Christian church going on where it's the belief of hell is essentially a nihilism, where it's not eternal torture, but it's rather you just destroyed. It's almost like what an atheist would view as death, like you're just no longer existing. And I'm actually taking that path because there's been a lot of pagan and tradition that's been melded in with the original Christian manuscripts to where people believe that hell is like this fiery, eternal torture. But in reality, the Bible doesn't actually say that. Whenever Jesus says hell, it's translated to Geneva, which is a literal landfill south of Jerusalem. And so when you read that, you're kind of like, well, is it really eternal torture? Would God really do that? So it's still kind of up in the air, but that's what I've been discovering as far as what the afterlife looks like.
I know a lot of people listening to this podcast are likely to be atheists, like myself, and don't particularly always appreciate listening to people's views. But I think it's important that I ask these kind of questions a lot and interview people from every background, every religion, every culture, so that we can get a different perspective and kind of put all the puzzle pieces together. As me myself, I'm trying to figure out my own belief system, and like yourself, I'm very, very open-minded. And yeah, I'm just trying to figure out the answers, I guess. And that's one thing that led me to question my own faith. Is I've for the last maybe 10 years or so, I've strongly believe in evil, and I strongly believe that evil forces have power, and also good forces have power. And I see, I talk about this a few times on the podcast as well, and I see the world the way it is right now, and there is a lot of what looks like dark, negative, evil forces that have a hand in potentially manipulating the population. And you see it in Hollywood, you see it in hear it in music, you see it in all over, in the food, in the pharmaceutical industry. Like, the whole world just seems to be, in my opinion, and I'm sure not everyone will share this opinion, but like I say, I think it's important to have an open mind and listen to everyone else's opinions and perspective. But yeah, I think everything that I see from the last 10, 15 years and everything that I've looked into, it kind of leads me back to this. It's like, I believe in evil, so I must believe in good. But what is good? And I believe evil is, the devil, is Satan, is demons. And so I must believe in good, and I must believe there is something, but I don't know what that something is, whether it's, what Christians believe to be God, or what it is. But yeah, I just love to get everyone's opinion. So yeah, I appreciate you sharing your 2 cents on that.
I wholeheartedly agree. I mean, the only way to have conversation is to be open-minded and at least hear out the other person. And to all the atheists listening, like, I get it. Like, I know there are a lot of Christian groups that can be like a really bad example of what Christianity actually is. So I would just encourage you guys, especially people who like do believe in ghosts like yourself, like, you at least accept the supernatural is real. I would at least examine the New Testament and really look and hone in on the resurrection itself. Because what you'll find is, there's some other conspiracy theories where, maybe the disciples lied about Jesus' resurrection, or maybe they all hallucinated, right? There's all these different theories behind the resurrection and what actually happened there. But actually, if you believe in the supernatural, that is the most likely case, is that he just resurrected. If you do believe in the supernatural, all other theories, you have to cut some really sharp corners to get to even those conclusions. So I think anyone who's interested in ghosts or somewhat believes in the supernatural is already set up for at least looking into the resurrection, because at the end of the day, I mean, that is the backbone of Christianity. If the resurrection never happened, forget anything else in the Christian faith.
I'm down a rabbit hole right now on YouTube. For the last few weeks, I've been watching videos. Oh, there's tons. It's endless of like ex-Satanists or ex-witches being interviewed by different religious leaders on their podcast, and just sharing their experience about all the negative energies and dark forces that they kind of let into their life, and then they've all turned to religion. So yeah, it's just a fascinating concept. And like I said, I've put out podcasts before where I've interviewed people from certain religions, and I've had messages from people listening to the show just saying, I don't want to listen to them ranting on about religion and stuff. But like I say, I just think it's important that everyone has a chance to get their opinion across, and just for people to just listen. You don't have to believe in you don't have to have the same belief system or anything. But I think at the end of the day, the majority of us just are good people and want good things to happen in the world.
That in itself is crazy. Like how we all have some moral obligation. It seems like we all have some inherent moral compass, and that's also another big driver for me to go back to Christianity. And I guess I didn't say this, but I did walk away from it when I was in school, and went down some other paths, tried some other things, but I didn't find this peace that Christianity offered to me. But yeah.
So take us back to Iceland, Cam. How long ago did you guys visit?
So it was for our 1 year anniversary. We got married in 2023.
Congratulations.
Kind of scary. I had to think about that. But so it was around May of 2024, and we went to Iceland for 1 week. It was a direct flight from RDU, which is our local airport. That was one reason we went. So yeah, we just wanted to see Iceland. We heard it was beautiful, and it surely was. Lots of history, and there were volcanoes erupting at the time we were there.
Wow,
so that was a little interesting, but yeah, it was really fun.
That must have been a long flight for you guys. Did you manage to see the Northern Lights while you were there?
No, there's actually only like 2 hours of darkness during that time of the year, so we weren't able to see that, but we saw pretty much everything else. We saw like icebergs, volcanoes, like I was saying. The Blue Lagoon actually is the most popular spa there, and literally you could see a volcano erupting behind where we were. There's a picture of me with some drinks and just a volcano in the background. It was like very interesting, very cool experience.
Wow.
That sounds awesome. Yeah, as I think it's only a few hours from me, but I've not had the chance to go. But yeah, it's a place that I'd love to visit. So yeah, you're very lucky for getting to go there. So what were you and your wife doing just before this experience that you had? So did everything obviously seem normal? Nothing out of the ordinary happening?
Yeah, so what you do in Iceland pretty much is you drive and you hike. So, and since it was May, daylight was around, I guess, at least 12 hours a day, maybe, yeah, I think actually 18. Anyways, so we were going through a national park called, and I'm going to butcher the name, I can't pronounce any name in Icelandic.
Yeah, I don't think anyone can unless you're from Iceland.
Yeah, but it's Thingvellir, I'm going to say, is the national park. And a fun fact is Game of Thrones, some scenes were filmed in that national park. I don't know if you've seen that show, but
Yeah.
yeah, so we were walking through that. It was in the afternoon, so we started around 8 a.m. that day, and we were just hiking, seeing other sights throughout the day. But I think it was around 5 p.m. when we arrived at this national park. And we wanted to see this waterfall. So I figured this out. Any waterfall has foss at the end of their naming. So this one was called Öxarfoss. At least I think that's how you say it. And it's very interesting. This national park, it's like a rift. So there's one side where it's like a plain, essentially. The land is very flat. And then on the other side, it's also a plain that's very flat. But there's just a big jump in elevation. It's almost like a piece of the land just fell. And so therefore you get like this straight wall of rock, and you're kind of seeing the crust of the earth. But there's also a waterway that goes in between that, and that's the waterfall where it falls off that cliff, and that's Öxarfoss. So we were walking around it, we saw a sign, and it was talking about the history. And it explained that there were some witch hunts around the 16th or maybe 17th century, and they would drown anyone who they thought was a witch in this body of water, which was very creepy. And after reading that, Actually, no, even before that, even before reading the sign, I felt something evil at play. Like I definitely felt like a little darkness. That's the best way I can describe it. Maybe you know that feeling. Um, but it was very unusual. We never felt that during the trip until that happened. And then when I read the sign, I'm like, huh, that's really strange. So off the bat, like even just that is kind of telling. But anyways, we saw the body of water. It was just kind of crazy to look at it and just think like people really drowned others because they thought they were a witch. Like right here, what I'm looking at. It was just very, very creepy.
I've seen some clips on in Iceland of some of the beaches there. They just had this insane current, and you get like these really naive tourists. Like you said, there's these signs just saying how on these beaches and saying how dangerous the riptide is and everything. I'm not sure if you've seen those, but yeah, there's all these little tourist spots, and it just looks like the most terrifying place to lose your life.
Yeah, actually, so my wife does most of the research. Thankfully, she did because I don't. But she was like, whenever we went to the black sand beaches, she's like, do not go near the water. Like, it's very random when like a big wave will come in.
There's a specific word for it, yeah, but I can't remember what it is. But yeah, where the wave comes, it's like, and it just pulls you in. It just looks like the power is insane.
Yeah, Mother Nature's different up there, man. It's crazy.
Sorry, I ruined your flow.
Yeah, no worries. So I guess I can talk about what happened. Well, first I want to talk more about witch hunts because when I read that sign, I was very confused because my naive self only thought the witch hunts happened in the New England region. But little did I know that was actually very popular in that weird specific time across Europe and also Iceland. So I was very interested into how could that be because I was always told it was just like some fungi growing on some wheat in the New England region and it just caused everyone to hallucinate and have like hysteria. But that can't be the case if it was also happening in Europe around the same time. So I went down that path and I found a little research. There's several factors that are considered into witch hunts and how they became prevalent. I guess they started around the 1400s and ended, in the 1700s. But there was a little ice age. That's one factor. Apparently, the climate just got really bad during that time period, and so caused famine and poverty. And potentially, they think witch hunts were a scapegoat for that. There's another factor where a bunch of theologians began publishing demonology handbooks. And this is also during the time when Martin Luther created the Protestant movement and kind of, the press for books was starting up. People were getting more copies of books for themselves to read. And so these theologians wrote a witchcraft handbook. Essentially, it was like a dummy's guide to witch killing. And it was the second most popular book in Europe during that time, just short of the Bible. So everyone was kind of reading this and becoming paranoid, right? And these people, before, they never really had access to books, right? But now they're reading it and they don't really know what to think of it. And then on top of all of that, like I said, Martin Luther starting the Protestant movement, that was threatening the Catholic religious power. And we have to think about this, like there's a clear separation of church and state now. But back then, like the Catholic Church was essentially the government. Like it had a lot of political power. And that's something we don't really think about anymore. So when the Protestant movement came on, it was more like politics. You can think of it like two parties fighting against each other. And there was a lot of fighting, which as a Christian, I don't know why they thought that was okay. I mean, it's obviously a sin to murder, but to be honest, I don't think they're not evangelicals. They didn't actually read the Bible for themselves and really decipher what it meant. It was more just politics. It was like a way to have power. And that's a big reason why I think people have a stigma against Christianity is from all this historical mess that it caused. But you'll find, you'll just be confused when you read the Bible. You're just like, how did they think that was okay to do? But anyways, they were fighting each other, and they, like now, like the media and like political parties, what they do is they cause hysteria, right? They cause fear. And witch killing and witches was one of those things where they would provide a service to kill your witches in your local town if we could influence your village. As long as you're with the Catholic Church, like we'll get all the witches out of your village. So there's that theory as well, and I guess that makes sense, and that explains more of the broader region of witch hunts, and it's just not some fun guy on a crop of wheat.
I guess I've never given much thought about the history of Iceland, to be honest. But your wealth of knowledge and research, it really is fascinating and has inspired me to want to look into this some more. So, yeah, thanks for sharing that. There's got to be something behind these witch trials, right? It didn't just happen, in certain places in the States, and it happened all over the world. And even now, witchcraft is still practiced in, especially in places like Africa. But yeah, I had no idea Iceland was involved in anything like that. But the UK, I'm not sure if you know much of the history of the UK, but witchcraft was a massive thing here, and witch hunting many a few hundred years ago was huge. And even now, you can go to certain villages, even up the road from me. And I've done a podcast and a video about a place that was a prison for witches, which is literally like 30 minutes up the road from me. So yeah, just before we get into your experience and story in Iceland, what do you think? What's your opinion about witchcraft? Do you think it's potentially a real thing, or do you think the world's just nuts?
I think it could be a real thing and the world is nuts, but I would say, looking back on the biblical view, witchcraft is mentioned in the Old Testament. But as far as actual witches, I don't think that is biblical. I think witchcraft in the Old Testament sense was just magic. And also during my research, I did figure out that magic was like very prevalent in those times. The Old Testament and the European early modern period where all these witch hunts were going on. So I think, superstition was very popular then, just these spells or whatever made people feel, like they could get someone to love them if they gave them a love potion, right? I don't know if that's necessarily true. I have heard some testimony from people, friends, even my dad, where, he knew some people practicing witchcraft and something actually happened, like that same day after that spell or whatever they did, and there was like a real consequence to it. That could have just been a coincidence, but I'm open to that. I'm open to, maybe like a demon, right? Maybe they're trying to get them to believe in this other power, and so if they just practice witchcraft, maybe the demon will do something on behalf of them to make them believe that witchcraft is real. But yeah, I'm not too sure on my answer to that, whether or not witchcraft is real. I definitely think it's been around a very long time, and yeah, I think I would say it's probably superstition, and maybe just some coincidences went on, but I'm not too sure. What about you?
Yeah, so I think there's got to be something. There's got to be some form of power. Whether that is a good force or a negative force. I think there's something or someone behind that power. But I think in every single culture across the world, they have different belief systems on this kind of things, but they all kind of go back to the same thing. It's like, one, you have to have faith, and two, you have to, it's something that you have to kind of be heavily kind of involved in to, not sure what I'm trying to say here, but yeah, my opinion is, I think if you give it the power that you think it has, then whether that's for good or for evil, then I think I think we are more powerful than we know, and I think
Yeah, I would say that I would agree with that. In whatever way that actually manifests, like I'm not too sure, but I do think there's some truth to that. If you have faith in something, it might happen.
Your ghost story. Your ghost story.
just want to take a moment to thank each and every one of you for your incredible support. Your Ghost Stories is just over a year old, and we're currently getting around 10,000 organic listeners per month, which is mind-blowing. As most of you guys will know, Your Ghost Stories is a fully independent podcast, and the running and upkeep of the show are entirely funded by myself. To help me continue bringing you these fascinating weekly interviews and stories, Your Ghost Stories is now accepting donations via PayPal. Each month, 50% of all donations will go to a different and selected charity, chosen by you through a poll on our Instagram page on the 1st of each month. The remaining 50% will be used directly to help keep the podcast up and running and expand our reach through marketing. Your contributions not only help us to grow and continue to thrive, but more importantly, will make a difference in the world. You'll find a link to donate any amount of your choice in the description of this episode or via the website yourghoststoriespodcast.com. If you're not in a position to donate, I totally understand. Times are difficult for a lot of people right now, but if you still want to help support the show for free, you can do this by following the podcast on Spotify or Apple or wherever you listen to this podcast, or even better, by leaving us a kind review to help others just like you find the show. Thank you so much for your generosity and support.
Your ghost story. Your ghost story.
Okay, let's go back to Iceland. Can you describe in detail, set the scene, what happened and what made you feel like what you experienced was a supernatural experience?
Yeah, so I guess so after we went to the national park and we felt this kind of evil force at play. We went back to our hotel just to go to sleep, right? It's been a long day. It was probably 11 p.m. when we got back, and we were just out all day, like I said, driving and hiking, so we were exhausted. So when we were going to sleep, and I don't know if you ever do this, but whenever I'm trying to sleep, sometimes I'll just open my eyes just for a split second. I don't know why I do it, but it's just in the process of going to sleep. Sometimes I'll open up my eyes. And so when I opened up my eyes, in the left-hand corner of my sight, there's the curtain on the left-hand side of the hotel room. And in the curtain, I could see vividly, a face. And it was, a woman's face. I would say it probably looked like how, Hollywood would show a ghost. It was pale, but it had dark lines to draw the definition of the face. And her mouth was open, and it was just black. And all of this is going on. It's just a split second. All right. And so when I open my eyes, I see that, and then she's coming forward very fast. And it just scared the shit out of me. It was a split second, but it all happened very vividly. And I kind of jolted, and it was very scary. And I just played it off like everyone else would say. I feel like that's very cliche. It's I didn't think much of it. I just thought I was very tired. And that was just something I saw, especially after, seeing this national park and discovering that they had witch hunts. I was thinking it was just my mind playing tricks on me. So, I don't tell my wife about it. I just go to sleep. She's already passed out. So later in the night, she wakes up, and she's, panting. She's sweating and, very scared. She woke me up. And she was I'll tell you about it later, but there was something that happened to her. And so in the morning, she tells me that she was dreaming, and on the left-hand side of her, like the same area where I saw this figure, she heard a woman saying, "I am here, I am in this room." And it was very clear to her. It felt like even more realistic than a dream. Like it was a very vivid dream at the very least. And so she woke up scared. I actually think she asked me like if I heard something. Like I think she was very convinced someone was in the room. And it was very scary for her. And I didn't tell her about the vision that I saw until the morning. So the two experiences we had, we didn't know that the other person had their experience, which I think adds to the possibility that this was a ghost or a demon or whatever you want to call it. My wife surely thinks it was a demon. That could be the Christian belief, but she felt like it was an evil spirit, not just a spirit. So yeah, it was wild. It was kind of crazy that we had two very similar, coherent experiences without actually knowing the other person's. And that hotel was scary already. It's like an older hotel with red carpet.
Do you feel like something potentially attached itself to you guys from earlier on in the day by the water, potentially because of some of the emotions you were feeling at that time, or do you think perhaps the negative energy was something that was from the area, the hotel that you were in?
We are convinced that it followed us from the national park because, like I said, we felt that evil force at the national park. Perhaps it could see our fear. I don't know if it could sense fear or not. But my worldview and the biblical worldview suggests that demons, they're not omnipresent, so they just can't be like anywhere. They have to follow you, or they can roam around, but only like in a finite space, kind of like how we can't just be anywhere. So we think it followed us, and for what reason, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe because I was kind of interested. Whenever I read something interesting like the witch hunts in Iceland, my curiosity goes off, and maybe it could sense like, oh, maybe this person I could get to or something. I don't know what their mission would be, but we definitely think it followed us.
So since you guys left and came home, I take it you've had no more strange encounters?
No, and actually, thank the Lord, that was the last night in that hotel, and we had like 4 days left. And this was outside of Reykjavik, which I think is the capital of Iceland. So then we traveled more south to Vik, and that hotel was fine. Even then, like, we didn't feel or see anything. So my wife, she was very, very scared, and she rebuked the spirit in the name of Jesus. That's what she said to it. So we think it left after that. And so, yeah, ever since then, we haven't had any more encounters with it.
Wow, what a truly interesting and unique story. Thanks so much for coming on and sharing your views and that tale with us. Now hopefully this tale is going to be on the internet for the rest of time, and it's just, it's nice, being able to put different stories on the map. So I really appreciate you sharing that. I'd love to know if anyone else, I'll have to have a look into it, but see any other experiences people have had in that area, because obviously being from the UK, I focus a lot just on stories around where I live and stuff like that. What were you going to say? Sorry.
I wanted to ask you, like, interviewing so many different people, do you see any like coherence in people's stories?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And one that keeps coming up all the time is something I've actually experienced myself. So if you listen to our very first episode, it's called Host Stories. I tell kind of every story that's led me to want to have a podcast. It's like loads of little things that have happened throughout my life, and one of the, I'd say, most memorable experiences that I've had is so I heard basically what's known as like a trickster spirit, which can throw its voice to sound like a family member or something like that. But so I was once sitting in when I lived with my mum, sitting in my bedroom, and I heard a knock on my door saying, "Jamie, come downstairs now." And it was my stepdad's voice. And I just thought it was really strange. The whole story in detail is in episode 1, but it was just really weird and out of place. And I was just like, why? What's up? And it was just silence. No one was there. And ended up, I went downstairs and he didn't come upstairs. He didn't knock on my door. And, my mum was in the sitting room, so she'd have heard him come up. And he was, a few hundred yards down the garden in a shed. And I'd come down straight away. And yeah, it was just that one thing has come up time and time and time again, where people's voices are being called in a voice they recognise, a close family member or something. And I honestly, I'm only 70 odd episodes in. That must have come up at least 10 times.
Wow. Yeah, it's kind of interesting to see like the characteristics, at least, like to draw out this kind of spirit and what it can and can't do, what it looks like, what it sounds like.
And one thing that comes up time and time again, and I think we touched on it earlier, but I believe that if we give something power, if we give something fear, or the opposite, if we give something a lot of positive, good energy, we really can manifest things in our lives. And I believe I've manifested negative things in my life and positive things in my life just from the power inside me, I guess. And that to a lot of people that probably sounds crazy, but yeah, I just from what I've learned, I think we have a lot more power than we realize. So yeah, is there anything else you'd like to touch on before we close it up?
No, I think that was it. I wish I knew more of a motive for this thing that scared us, but that's just what our experience was. So glad you can let me share it.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing it. So yeah, it was great to chat to you, and hope you have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, thanks. You too, Jamie.